Now, thinking about working and tax on work. So this is income tax. It's not been lost on many, especially many of Labour's opponents, political opponents, and otherwise, that the tax rates have not changed in almost a decade at the time of recording. So as I mentioned, you have a tax-free allowance of about 12,570. I think about at 38,000 is the next banding where it's about 20%. Then you get to about 50,000. I can't remember the exact bandings, but just take them as illustrative for the purpose of this discussion, where it'd be about 40%. And then you get to about 127,000, I believe, or something like this, before you're at the additional higher rate. But what happens, as I mentioned, is that after 100,000 or so, you start losing your personal allowance, and that diminishes every £2 you earn over £100,000. So what has been talked about in this regard is the idea or the concept of fiscal drag. So what you would expect over time is that your salary increases with inflation, and that's a reasonable assumption. That's typically historically what happens, and this is on a macro level, right? So it's not, in your own individual situation, your salary may not get adjusted for inflation, but on a macro level, on aggregate, salaries increase by inflation. And then what that means is that because those bandings never change, more and more people are being subject to increasing tax amounts. And then what is also happening is that the cost of living is increasing with inflation as well. So basically what this means is that you're in a situation where, let's say, for example, you're earning £80,000 now, and in the future, you're earning £100,000. So in theory, in the future, you're richer. But what you're finding is that the cost of living is a lot higher in the future than it was now. So that £100,000 actually has the buying power of £70,000 today. And I know that's a strange concept to imagine, but that's essentially what inflation and cost of living does. If the cost of living goes up a lot higher than your earnings, then you're basically poorer. And then if the amount of tax you're paying also increases as you're getting poorer, it compounds the fact that you're poorer. And that's essentially what is going on. And that's part of the reason why you're seeing this diminishing general living standards, and why everything just feels more expensive, and why house prices are running away from salaries. They're running away from them in terms of house price inflation is higher and more accelerated than wage inflation, but also more of your wages by virtue of fiscal drag are being subject to more and more tax. So you're poorer and you're paying more tax if you are a worker. So this is why there has been a growing, buy-in to the idea of rethinking how taxes are applied, and that's why the discussions around an asset tax is gaining momentum. And I would agree with that. But I would also hope, and this is not a prediction, that there would be a change to these bandings, these tax bandings, to reflect inflation. I don't think it's going to happen. And, I don't think the government can even afford to make it happen. But I think it's something that they have to address in some way, and they have to think about this, because it is not sustainable to increase taxes. And they actually do need to do this. I think national debt, national borrowings now is about 3 trillion at the time this video was being made, and growing. So they've got to find a way of raising more taxes. But what they can't continue to do is keep looking at the PAYE system, just based on these different variables that are conspiring against working individuals. So as I say, I don't think there'll be any changes around these bandings. And I think in a way that's almost good news, because I think in an ideal world, from the Chancellor's perspective, they would want to increase taxes on income. In many ways, I feel like they have to. And from our perspective, we would want to see those tax bandings lifted to offset this concept of fiscal drag that I've described. So the only safe halfway house is that there's effectively no change. So as I say, I don't expect there to be changes around this. I don't even think it was necessarily up for discussion in many ways. But I think it is important to raise this point because, as I say, the Chancellor is in a situation where they need to get a handle on the deficit and they need to get a handle on the overall borrowing that is happening on a national level, and look to bring this down. Because, as I say, the current projections just mean the level of borrowing is just going up and up and up. And as I say, it's not, in my view, economically sustainable.